the first to know Nsem-Pii TV.
Alfred Ababiu Kumi a idin a dodo na atade frɛ no eye Adenta Kumi e de babetu edwa se NDC amanyokuo no etimi ene some of the Supreme Court judges ni bi and afi 5-member committee no etimi akwa baabi adidi ene nkomodie a ekɔ so no abusuafo na enye asem kotwa ene NDC amanyokuo no etwen sere ne abasa ana enya asem kotwa ebinom sa asem na Adenta Kumi ka no enya no kro bi mu nso se ye no kro a otimi ede asem no kra kokopie mu court se nke beye a enka yentimi dissolve the 5-member committee no because Thaddeus sorry a lawyer for Richard Ofori a ono nso etimi file petition ekokopie mu Supreme Court say yen shine Chief Justice to akonya same person ena osane Justice Johnny Kolendi ena afei other justices no a one etimi ewo committee ni bi so akwa na ba bi faako adidi edian ena ekọ so CC footage aba beto abonten na abusuafo enye asem kotwa aye shocking pa a enye asem kotwa na ode yenko ne yenko some of the CCTV footage no eni emu enchiremu.
To give this context, you need to understand the petition. So the petition, as we learned a couple of days ago, claims that on Thursday, last week Thursday, on the 15th of May 2025, between the hours between 7:30 and 8:30 p.m.,
right,
Gabriel Paman, Justice Gabriel Paman, Justice Edudzi, Justice Johnny Kolendi were seen at a restaurant, right? In a particular restaurant. They mentioned the particular restaurant's name, having dinner with Thaddeus Sorry.
Right.
And Thaddeus Sorry is counsel for one of the petitioners, Daniel Fori. And at this particular meeting, this petition also claims that they were overheard discussing the petition and the process that is currently underway. Now, again, the petition itself clarifies that, as we know, Justice Gabriel Paman is the chair of the investigative committee set up by the president under the Constitution 146.
Right.
Justice Edudzi is a member of that committee. So the two Supreme Court judges. The petition claims that these two Supreme Court judges were in this restaurant together with Johnny Kolendi, Justice Johnny Kolendi, who we know is not a member of the investigative committee, but he's a Supreme Court.
Member of the Supreme Court, and also Thaddeus Sorry.
And also Thaddeus Sorry, who is the counsel for one of the petitioners. Now, the petition, when I say petitions, I mean the petition to remove the CJ. Now, this petition that makes this allegation then goes on to claim that at this meeting, they discussed the petition, and it was part of a plot to manipulate the ongoing hearing, which, remember, this began last week, Thursday. The formal hearing began last week, that this was part of the plot, and they had gone there to meet to conspire to manipulate the process. So on the back of which he then requested the president to dissolve the committee.
5-member committee. So it's instructive to know that this footage was taken after the first hearing.
After the first hearing. That, and then the petition also creates that context for us. So this is the allegation, right? So let's watch, and I will do this in frames on the back of what we now know is a petition. So we'll pause it here.
All right. So
this is the entrance of the said restaurant. This is the entrance of the said restaurant. Now, what we see here are 3 individuals. We can confirm that the 3 individuals entering the restaurant at the time are 3 justices, right? And it's important, as we go through this, you see how it relates, contradicts or confirms anything that the petition had said. The first in front, we believe, is Justice Kofi. Okay, that's the first in front. The second, there, the slightly taller one behind, is Justice Johnny Kolendi. The shorter one is Justice Edudzi. Okay, so these 3 went there. The first thing you see immediately, as it relates to the petition, is that it has no Justice Gabriel Paman.
The chair of this 5-member
The chair of wasn't there, at least is not captured in the CCTV footage. So the three walking, it's Justice Kofi, Justice Kolendi, and the shorter one we see here is Justice Adibuasedu, right? So it doesn't have in there Justice Gabriel Parman, as has been alleged in the petition. So that's the first thing to note.
And out of the three, the short one is a member of this 5-member committee.
So out of the three, that's important. The short one here, the short justice, because we are just describing so you can see what, is the only member of the 5-member committee, right? And he's a Supreme Court judge who's on the committee. The chair, as has been alleged, isn't in this particular footage that we've secured, that we're showing you. We'll move this on. So then they make their way into the restaurant, and again you see here more clearly, you see this is another frame of the footage. You will pause it here, and then you see another frame. So in the lead is Justice Kofi here. There is, now you see a bit more clearly, that is the Justice Adibuasedu, who is a member of the committee, and then following Justice Kolendi. Right, and they were moving into the restaurant, having entered from the front. So we continue. Now, pause it for a second. Move it on slightly so that I want to show you something. Pause it here. Now, remember that as they move, the people are already seated. But I want you to focus on this particular area here.
The rest appears to be minding their own business.
Yeah, they're not of importance. But this area here, they move on. They move on to their seat. And then pause. So you begin to see, so the two other justices continue to the corner.
Right.
And presumably they had already secured a table. So this is a restaurant, from what we understand. You can't just walk in. You must have called to reserve a seat. So they had walked into the corner there, going to sit down. So that is Justice Kofi and Justice Adibuasedu going to sit. But Justice Yoni Kolendi, somebody sees him, recognizes him, shakes his hand, it interacts a bit with this individual. I don't know who that person is, but let's move on. And then immediately,
somebody stood up.
And there's a hug. There's a hug, right? Embraces him, hugs him briefly.
And is this person a person of interest?
A person of interest. We can say that this individual is Tadio Sori, right? And again, it's important. He was already seated
when they came in.
Already having his dinner with somebody else that had already come to the place with, or maybe the person met him there, but he's already seated, right? When the three justices entered the restaurant. And in fact, the first person the Justice Yoni Kolendi saw was this individual who was sitting across him, and then he gets up and hugs him. So he was already seated in the restaurant. We can move this along. And so there's this brief hug, right? And a quick pleasantries exchanged. Then you see, and then pause again, then you see that the two other justices have already gone to their corner, the seat that they've reserved. But then you see, at this point, Yoni Kolendi, so people have already seen him and trying to hug him. But then you see that Thaddeus walks, because he obviously had now seen the other, justices of the Supreme Court having exchanged a pleasantry with the Yoni Kolendi. He walks on. He walks on, and this is the most important part. He walks on, shakes hands
with them,
and with the first justice he met after Yoni Kolendi, which we say is Justice Kofi. And let's play this on, because this shows us the timelines. And shakes hands with him. The justice goes to sit down, shakes hands and bows to Justice Adibuasedu, who is a member of the investigative committee. Bows again, bows to the other justice as well. Shakes hands with him. And
at this stage, Yoni Kolendi appears to be engaging in some kind of conversation with some other people.
Because they have seen him, they know him. I know Yoni. He was a very famous lawyer before. People see him and they recognize him. So he was talking. At that point, there was no conversation between Yoni and him. He had just gone to, in a few seconds, shake hands, bow, and he was leaving. Let's play this on. So this lasts a few seconds, this conversation, this brief handshake, pleasantries. And then he returned. That is Thaddeus. So he returns and looks at it and takes his seat, right? And takes his seat. We'll play this again. Now, if you look at this brief pleasantries that was exchanged.
Yeah.
It lasted a total of 10 seconds, if you like, between the time that he goes there, exchanges hands, greets, not more than 20 seconds, because this footage itself is less than 1 minute,
Right.
30 seconds.
Right.
Shakes and comes. Now, a few things that are important. We need to play this from the beginning. A few things that we see is important here. Remember that the petition had said that there was a meeting at which a discussion was had about the process itself. People heard them discussing and they sat, and this was a dinner. So this was a premeditated dinner that had been arranged to meet and, as the petition used the word, manipulate the process.
Right.
The evidence that we see, at least in this footage, shows something completely different, which is that, one, Thaddeus Sory was already seated with somebody else when the three justices enter. And indeed, when he recognizes them, the two other justices, after he had exchanged pleasantries with Yoni Kulendi, he walks to them, seated in the corner, and greets them, bows, as all lawyers will do,
Right.
and returns to his seat, right? So this doesn't show evidence of meeting, of course, to talk about, because I wonder, you have to ask the question, that pleasantry, you're seeing it here. This is the area here. That is the only time we see any contact between himself and the other two, in addition to the first exchange of pleasantries that is had with Yoni. And then he returns to his seat. And it's important, remember that Thaddeus himself had put out a rebuttal.
A rebuttal, and we'll try and bring that on to establish whether it makes meaning of what we are seeing in this footage.
It was very categorical in that post that no such meeting happened, right? No such meeting happened. You watch this and you have to make up your own mind. Was there a meeting after he came to sit down? I mean, when he sat down in this frame that we're seeing here, that showed that there was a conversation around and it's important to also make the point that in the petition, the petitioner had referenced the point about judges meeting ex parte, right? I've heard the petitioner make the point. Then you have to ask the question, was this a premeditated meeting at which, obviously, the individual who was representing one of the petitioners had then formed a band, conspired with the other three justices to discuss the process? We say in the evidence that we don't see that in this particular evidence for us that we've reviewed.
My question really is, I mean, do we know why they were in the restaurant in the first place?
I mean, so that's a very important context. So first thing we notice, and once you have a photo, you need to understand the context. It's our understanding that Justice, that day, Thursday, was the birthday of the Justice, so the three judges. So it was Justice Adibu Asedu, and then there was the Justice Kofi. So that Thursday was the birthday of Justice Kofi, from what we understand. Was the birthday of Justice Kofi.
The first person who entered.
Right? The previous week, right, had been the birthday of Justice Adibu Asedu, and they had then decided that they were going to go to a private place, a restaurant, if you may, and sort of celebrate the birthday of Justice Kofi and the previous week of Justice Adibu Asedu. So that, from what we understand, is the reason why they had gone to the restaurant to celebrate the birthday of Justice Kofi and the previous birthday that had fallen the week before of Justice Adibu Asedu. So that's, in essence, is why they had gone there.
And then also, the petitioner is alleging of conversation he had at this particular restaurant. And it's one of the reasons why he's asking that the president takes steps to dissolve this committee from further probing the case or the matters against the Chief Justice. This is just 1 minute. Is it possible that there may be more?
I mean, you know, as journalists, we restrict ourselves to the evidence before us, right? This is the evidence before us. The evidence before us is this. And we say in journalism, until you have counter evidence or additional evidence, you work with the evidence that you have. In this evidence that we're looking at, it shows 3 individuals, justices of the Supreme Court, one a member of the investigative committee, going to celebrate the birthday of 2 of them, right? One of them obviously isn't celebrating the birthday, but they went together to a restaurant to have dinner, right? That's what it shows. Secondly, it shows that the only individual of interest in this particular petition that raises all the questions that he's raising about manipulation, that the committee should be dissolved, Thaddeus Story, was already seated in the restaurant as the evidence shows, because when they walked in, he was already seated. They met him there. And he gets up, as every lawyer will do if you see a judge walk into a space that you're in, shakes them, which is what you see there, and bows, shakes, and returns to the seat, right? You're watching this, you need to balance this against what the petition is saying, that there was a conversation about the process with the intention of manipulating it. And so the credibility of the process, of the entire process and the committee itself is untenable and must be dissolved. You need to ask yourself whether that exchange, the pleasantries that were exchanged, lasting not more than 20 seconds, is enough basis to conclude that there was a discussion, a meeting.
All right.
And with discussion.
Evans, I'll come to you, but I just want our viewers to read through what Thaddeus Story put out after this this petition was made public relating to the petitioner sending it to the presidency, demanding that the committee is dissolved. Let's read through what he said, and whether or not what he referenced as no meeting can also be an encounter. Very easy to fact check that. We know those who get justice through negotiation. Yeah. Now, I just want to understand meeting in this context, because clearly he met one of the commissioners in this.
One of the committee members.
Well, yes, one of the committee members. I'm trying to read his mind and to understand what he meant by there was no such meeting. When indeed the footage clearly showed that there was an encounter. There could have been a meet somewhere.
So you need to understand his use of the word meet in the context of the petition. But the petition creates the context. The petition says when they said they had dinner and there was a meeting at which conversations were had, they discussed the ongoing process, right? So that's the context within which you have to understand that. And then you look at the video, what we saw until he comes to sit is less than 20 seconds. Did you see, and when you watch this, you have to ask yourself, did you see in that conversation when he went there to greet and exchange pleasantries, anything that suggests that, and remember that they were still standing.
Right.
Just watch it. They are not even seated yet. They're going to take the seats when he walks and exchange. In 20 seconds, in this 20 seconds less, they actually discuss the process, ongoing process. The evidence says he shakes, he hugs, bows, and then bows and shakes, and then returns. Is this a meeting that discussed the process? The evidence is there for you to judge.
And then finally, do we know whether the presidency has taken custody of this petition and whether there's been further action on it?
That we don't know. But what I can tell you is that since we got a petition, we asked those who said they had petitioned, can you give us a stamped copy, receipt, that shows evidence of receipt at the Jubilee House? What we got wasn't exactly that, right? Because you know when petitions are submitted to state institutions, there's a stamp on it that shows you the official stamp of the institution, the time it was received, and the date, right? We didn't have a stamp. What we had was a name of an individual who has a signature there and writes the date on it. For us, it doesn't conform with what the norm is of an officially received petition, right? Today, we've seen one petition, for example, that relates to former Attorney General, that we believe had been submitted to the General Legal Counsel. On that petition, you clearly will see a received stamp, right? Same, you will also see if a writ is filed, the process is filed at the Supreme Court, you will see a stamp on it that says received, tells you the date, and certifies it as having been received. We did not see that on that document. So I can't really say if indeed this is a petition that indeed has been formally first being submitted and received by the Jubilee House.
All right. Let me